Members, the question is the words to be deleted be deleted. The Honourable Brian Walker.
Thank you, President. Moving this amendment to the motion represents, I would think, one very cogent reason why the entire population of the health service workers holds Parliament in contempt. We, who stand at the front lines, who on a regular basis have to deal with the problems mentioned in the first part of this programme, we are the ones who watch and see how our health service is being abused, maligned, mistreated, praised when it serves Parliament, vilified when it doesn't serve Parliament. And the understanding for our work was completely unrecognised. This amendment has been brought to try and save the government at present from shame. But I have to tell you, from the health service workers' perspective, both sides of Parliament, in fact all sides of Parliament, deserve the same contempt and shame. Because what we see is a failing health service, and anyone who works in that system will tell you that. And modifying the words here does not change anything, not even one whit. We have a health service where the costs are expanding. We know 45% increase since 2017, according to the government figures. This is, and as the Honourable Martin Aldrich has said, this has year on year, or budget on budget, resulted in increases. And rightly so, because the costs of healthcare are increasing and have been increasing. I've been saying this since 1994-ish. The health service costs are increasing, but the benefits to the people from wellness are not. They're decreasing, in fact. In fact, what we know now is that the life expectancy for people born now is going to be less than the life expectancy for people born in the generation before me. So, in fact, by that measure, we are failing. And what we are doing here in this place is playing with words. What we do not need in the health service is words. In this current, as I call it, the sickness service, what we need is action, fundamental action, which I will deal with in the second reading speech. But this motion to amend is once again a travesty of democracy, is once again, I would share the points of view of the Honourable Jon Sibma. It's a shame, a scandal, and probably does reflect to some degree a measure of the fear of a government which likes to highlight the benefits but turns a blind eye, in public at least, to the other side, the dark side of the health system. And I would have liked, last week and this week, to debate a motion put by the party, the Greens or the Nats, a motion untouched, so that we can freely and openly debate a point of view and not try and skew that to supporting one particular point of view, supported by an overwhelming majority on one side, where it's going to be guaranteed, which means absolutely fundamentally nothing, because what we're looking at here is just a blanket arithmetical trumping of views. That's not democracy. That is not serving our health service. Well, Honourable Member, it will go to the people, but I am talking about the people in the health service. The people in the health service who I represent. I'm glad you mentioned that. You're referencing my second speech. I will become that.
Members, the Honourable Dr. Brian Walker has the call.
Thank you, Acting President. And that very point is something I will be referencing in my speech to this motion. So I would reject the concept of amending the motion.
Members, the question is the motion as amended be agreed. The Honourable Dr. Brian Walker.
Thank you, Acting President. I want to continue my remarks made considering the amended motion there. And I actually thank the Honourable Pierre Young for doing this, and also the Honourable Ayoma Court-Stewart, because you've actually put into words my first point. our healthcare system is a failing healthcare system. And we see, budget on budget, increasing amounts of money being devoted to it. You can't not do it on either side of the House, because if you stop spending, if you stop increasing the health budget, people are going to die. And so there's no alternative for the government except to increase spending. And you gave a very nice list there, Honourable Yorma Court-Stewart, about how you're spending that money. Great. It doesn't actually change the fact that at the ground level, we're not getting any better. I remember listening in the inaugural speeches about how much money was being spent on mental health services. And my feelings then was, you don't actually know that at the ground level, not one single cent of that is being experienced in enhanced patient care. We can't not fund the health service. And so it's a failing system, and it's basically been stated in today. So I can actually agree with the amended motion. It's true. It is true. You're spending more money. Everyone is spending more money, and it's not doing any good. You're spending on infrastructure. You're spending on staff. It's an uphill battle. Okay? And we don't need to mention the new hospital at King Eddie's, the move there. I agree, the whole thing was very suspect. But the bottom line is a hospital has to be built. But just yesterday, I had calls from patients, but Bunbury. Apparently in Bunbury Hospital, maternal care is being seized, I think 6 or 8 weeks, to actually change the whole thing over, because they cannot recruit any staff. Now this, honourable members, this actually conflicts with this wonderful feel-good story. And I could point out to hospitals I've worked at, Newman, for example, where the services have been stopped a long time ago. Meriden, where I worked in the Wheatbelt, no maternity services, been deliberately scaled back. Now, I could go into that for hours as to why that's happened, but the bottom line is that doesn't happen. It's also, I wouldn't agree, Meriden Hospital is not a good example, I quite agree with you, but that's the fact of my experience there. So both sides, we've got underlying problems here which are not being addressed. Because as much money as you're chucking at the health service, we're not getting any improvement. And I would ask all of us here to actually learn how to offer solutions. And I heard this from the other side, a very right call. What are your solutions? Well, there are a number of things we ought to be doing. The first is recognise the truth of what I've said. Recognise the truth that we can spend as much as we want. We're not going to actually enhance our quality of life. We could look at, for example, mental health. The youth troubled in Banksia Hill, the mental health problems they've got, the neurodiversity they've got. Why we could look at that? There's a whole host of causes, none of which are being addressed. None are being addressed until too late, when they're actually in the prison service, or just before they get there. We try and fix that. I got a call from a colleague of mine just on Monday about a similar thing. How do we fix this problem? Well, we're a generation too late. We've got to do some real solid work. Now, there's a couple of reasons why the costs are going up. The first one we've really got to look at is waste. If you were to look at any healthcare system in Australia, and I have to commend the Honourable Mayor Stewart, because it is true that the service here is as good as I've come across in the world. It's true. I'd rather be here than the US. But does that mean there's nothing to be done? On the contrary, we have a huge problem. The amount of wastage in our health service is enormous. Enormous. And it's not being addressed. If you were to look at this properly, let's take the health bureaucrats out of the system, because they are the problem. A lot of our wastage occurs because of the bureaucrats, the multiplying bureaucrats, who actually tend to make the whole thing more difficult. If only we'd be looking very closely at where every single dollar is being spent and stopping the waste. The next one is, how can we spend more efficiently? How can we do things without wasting money? These are things which need to be addressed, not again at the health bureaucratic level, but listening to the healthcare practitioners at every level. If you had all the budget in the world and you had to keep it as tight as possible, what would you do to improve the system? And then listen to the people who provide that service. Listen to them, not the health bureaucrats. because they don't know how to do that. There's not one single health bureaucrat I know of, there may be others, but there's not one single health bureaucrat I know of who has ever had to manage a private company, has never had to be careful of the income, the revenue you generate. They're all managing a budget. And they're all caring about how they manage the budget and how to prevent themselves getting sued. Those are the only two things that the healthcare bureaucrats are concerned about. And I can point to any health system in our state where that is true. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, what we need to be doing is looking at the ultimate underlying causes of illness. We're allowing people to get sick and then treating them after they get sick and wondering why it's costing so much money. Members, does anyone here actually know the biggest single cause of lack of wellness in our society? I'll tell you. It's the food processing industry. The food processing industry is actually causing most of our chronic health disease problems. Has anyone at a political level seriously considered this? What we're seeing is that green tick of health for the heart health foods. I can tell you now, these foods are toxic. Do not touch them. And we're allowed this to happen. We're a sugar-dependent society. We have got guts which have been poisoned. The gut, if you were to open up the gut into its maximum area, it would occupy the size of a tennis court. Every single part of that intensely active immunologically, biochemically. But most people regard it as a deeply unsexy place where poo is made. The foundations of our physical wellness are being attacked by a food processing industry answerable to its shareholders and operating for profit. From the agricultural side, our land is being poisoned. We're using toxins. We're ripping the soil. We're not caring for the sustainable environment. But the end product, if you compare an analysis of the vegetables we're getting now with the analysis of the vegetables in 1930, you will see a decline in the minerals, in the vitamins. You'll see a decline in the actual quality of the food. The reason for this? Modern agriculture. Now, I have to say that our farmers in Western Australia are some of the best in the world, the most scientific. Using tools, however, which in the last analysis is resulting in a reduction in the quality of food, an increase in the toxins. I saw yesterday a woman who came to me with an analysis, and there was mercury in her system, and there was antimony in her system. Where, she asks, does it come from? We have no single place in our bodies where mercury is needed, not one single place. And yet we have a normal level. Within these levels, you're okay. We're not. And this is true for a wide range of chemicals. And we allow that to happen. And as a result, people get sick. Now let's talk about mental health. If you look at the costs to our community in terms of money, in terms of social fabric, in terms of financial status, you will find a multi-billion-dollar loss. But if you look at what psychiatrists have been able to do in managing mental health over the last 50 years, you will scarcely see an improvement. What you will see is a massive prescribing of drugs which result in, let me tell you, metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, with resulting blood pressure problems, renal failure and early death. So if you're going to kill our mental health patients, at least do it quickly, humanely, rather than letting them lead an existence. I'm being sarcastic, members, of course. But maybe we need some sarcastic humour to point out the fact that we're actually poisoning people. We're not actually making people well. And if we look here at I was speaking this morning with veterans who were asking, can we get some help for managing PTSD? There's 8 or 9 suicides every day in this country of ours. A lot of that is due to PTSD. And the treatment for that, psychiatrically, is abysmal. And yet still, we refuse to consider the alternatives, like cannabis, for example, like the psychedelics, which have psychedelics, an 85% cure rate, for goodness sakes, an 85% cure rate, and we decide not to do that. Why? I've yet to find a good scientific reason for that. I see prejudice. I don't see good chemical or pharmacological reasons why we're abandoning these very useful treatments and why we let people in our society die, 8 or 9 a day, because we have failed to make use of possible resources. And this is just one symptom of a health service which needs more attention. Yes, we need money, but we need not to waste the money. We need to spend it better, and we need to, most importantly, get the underlying causes of disease and illness and manage that. But I have not heard one word of this approach from any government, at least since 2008. I haven't. Why is that? I've heard bickering across the chamber. I've heard people mentioning how much money they're spending, actually giving a real credible solution. I do not see that. And that's all I see when I'm working with my colleagues in a hospital, in an emergency department, in their general practice. All I see and all I hear is disillusionment of those healthcare workers that you have just applauded. It's like when we had the COVID time, we're applauding the healthcare workers. Great. All we wanted to do was to get some sleep. All we wanted to do was to go to work with the reassurance we'd come back home alive. There were times when I would go to work not knowing if I'd see my family again. And still I went to work, like every other healthcare worker. And does anyone here actually care? You might give a bit of applause now and then, but do you really, in your visceral ground nature, do you actually care? Think on that. So, while I will regret the amended motion, I will acknowledge it points out the truth. And the underlying truth we need to deal with here is that the health system needs attention. It needs qualified attention. It needs non-political management. It needs non-bureaucratic management. The healthcare workers who know the system, who know the issues, who can deal with them, are hampered by the system.
Honourable Member,
We must.
Honourable Member, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the mover has the right of reply for the final 5 minutes of the debate. So I will interrupt you and give the call to the Honourable Martin Lord.